I'm not a big fan of Substack for novelists. For novelists, it doesn't have good reader magnet support. Its newest first layout doesn't work well for serialized fiction, and it can be hard to build a following. And I think most novelists are better off using the free version of Kit and WordPress. But because of that, I haven't been talking about Substack enough because it's a totally different story for nonfiction authors. If you are a subject matter expert, you can attract readers, engage them with your expertise, and convert them into paying subscribers all on one platform, all on Substack, and you can do it all for free. So Substack is the best kind of free where they want you to make money so that they can make a cut, but until you start making money, they won't charge you. This is a very different kind of free than, say, Facebook, where you are the product being sold to advertisers. And these are just some of the reasons why Substack is such a game changer for nonfiction authors. But it's not all rainbows and butterflies. Substack is going through a radical and controversial transition right now from a blog and email platform more into a social network. So how can nonfiction authors use Substack to grow, engage, and monetize their expertise? And is Substack even a fit for you? We'll find out in this episode of Novel Marketing, the longest running book marketing podcast in the world. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more of these episodes in your feed. And I allow myself one nonfiction focused episode of Novel Marketing every year. So if you write fiction, you may not find this episode as helpful, but it may help you figure out if Substack is for you. But our focus today is teachers, experts, speakers, podcasters, pastors, and any other kind of nonfiction author. And we have a special guest to help us journey through the Substack forest. He's a screenwriter and author and host of the Stand Up Theologian podcast, and he also runs 3 different Substack accounts. James Cary, welcome to the Novel Marketing Podcast.
Thanks for having me. 3 does sound a lot when you say it out loud like that, doesn't it?
It seemed like a good idea at the time, but now you got to feed each one of them. But before we talk about any tips or who it's for, we should first talk about what is Substack, because there's a lot of people who are vaguely familiar with it, but they don't really understand how the platform works.
Substack is essentially what everybody hoped blogging would be 20 years ago, because it's a really easy to use, low tech, clean writing platform where you can acquire followers. You're building your mailing list. You get to keep your mailing list. And so if you show up and write regularly, then everybody can get an email whenever you put something up. And then if you think you can get away with it, you can start offering a membership and upgrade to paid. And so if you've got expertise particularly, then that is a good way of blogging and monetizing it. And you don't really have to worry about anything else. So I think it's a bit of a one-stop shop for a certain kind of person. But I think in general, it's just a really easy platform to use. And to quote Steve Jobs, it just works. So if you're someone who produces a lot of regular content, I think Substack is really helpful. It's really easy to read as well, unlike Patreon, which I don't think is a good interface for reading. And there's an app as well. So you can get your readers to download the app and then they're just reading it on an app as well. So they've worked out a pretty good ecosystem, which has broadly been unchanged for a while. You can also upload video and audio as well. It's quite limited on format and like dragging in pictures. You can't inset pictures on the right and have text on the left and that kind of thing.
Which is a bad practice for bloggers, by the way. So it's not a bug in Substack, it's a feature. Because trying to wrap text around images is a very print design way of thinking. It doesn't work well on mobile. It doesn't even work well on the computer. So I know you want to, and for web pages, it's fine. But for a reading experience, giving people a break from the text to look at a photo is actually the preferred format.
There you go. You know your stuff and they know their stuff, and therefore it's in their interest to keep people reading. So I think that's why it just feels like it's a platform that's working with you if you're someone who is regularly producing content. And so I basically use it as a newsletter, but my newsletter is content in itself. And I want people to sign up because they get a regular weekly thing from me. And it just kind of works really well for that.
Yeah, the focus of Substack is on simplicity and ease of use. So from a blogging perspective, it's not nearly as powerful as WordPress. If you go to authormedia.com, I've got all these categories and these subcategories, and they're linked with tags and doing a lot of advanced things with the blog. Substack can't do all of that. And the same with the email newsletter, right? If with a real email newsletter service like Kit, you can have reader magnets and all of that. And with podcasting, if you're using Buzzsprout for podcasting, you can insert dynamic content. So you can put promos for the new things on the old episodes. And like with Patreon, you can have a dozen different pricing tiers, and Substack gives you like one pricing tier. But by being less powerful, they're able to pull all of those different services into one single service and make it free and make it really easy to use. So a lot of people, as I was rattling off Kit and WordPress and Buzzsprout and Patreon, I was like, that's a lot of tools to kind of connect to each other, when Substack could replace a lot of those things. Although I still would recommend having your own WordPress website in addition to Substack. I don't trust them enough, since you're not paying them. You're still sharecropping in a sense on their land.
I think that's right. Yeah, it shouldn't be a replacement for an author website. And I've got one of those. It's not very good. And every time you talk about your course, I slightly wince and go, I really need to take a look at my author website. But I don't actually have a book out at the moment. And I've got a live show that I'm touring around the UK. So it kind of works for that as a landing page and gives people the information. But yeah, it keeps it simple, which I think is really helpful. And for most people, they're not tech savvy. They're not interested in the kind of the details, and they don't even want to do blogging on a WordPress. So it might be better to have a blog on your own website, and that's fine. But there are other things that Substack have done, which is create a little bit of an ecosystem as well. And that's the other thing that I think is a positive. But so they've created a new thing called Notes, which I'll get onto in a moment. But before that, it was just very easy to recommend other people's Substack blogs. Even when they sign up for yours, they can say, oh, would you also like to sign up to these other two that this author recommends? And all of a sudden, you're onto somebody else's mailing list, as it were, and they're engaging with you.
Yeah, it's real easy to create a kind of an ecosystem. If you have 4 or 5 people that are all thought leaders on a certain topic, particularly if they have a different perspective than the mainstream, it's really easy for each one of them to pull people into that whole little bubble. And it's quite interesting to see, because I think a bigger user of Substack as a reader than I am as a content creator. So I do technically have a Substack for the Christian Publishing Show, and we post our episodes there, but it's more of a learning experience for me to kind of keep up with Substack as a platform. But I really enjoy reading certain Substacks, and it is interesting because you do get pulled in and they start to fight with each other, and you can fight with somebody that you also are recommending, right? And so you're creating this whole kind of drama bubble of entertainment / education, which I think actually brings up a really important question, which is, who is Substack for? So I alluded to how it's hard to make it work for fiction because of the things that novelists need. The biggest thing a novelist needs is the ability to deliver reader magnets to readers that are short stories they can read on their Kindle. And Substack just doesn't work with that ecosystem very well. If you're good at exporting CSVs and you fiddle with it and you're super technical, you can kind of sort of make it work. But then all of the advantages of Substack just went away because it's not easy to do a reader magnet on Substack. You have 3 different platforms. So walk us through your 3 and who you think Substack does work well for.
So my first one, I think, is called Cary's Almanac. And so that is about my interest in church history and the liturgical calendar. It used to be a bit of a personal overlap of church culture, faith, and that kind of stuff. And then I realized that it wasn't specific enough, but that I was also realized in just seeing this through. So for the last 2 years, I've been going through the Christian calendar and just going, hey, it's St. Andrew's Day coming up next week. Who's St. Andrew? Blah, 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 blah. It's Michaelmas. Hey, what's Michaelmas? You know what? It was a big deal in the 14th century or whatever it was. So I tend to just do about 800,000 words on that. My dad really likes it. Okay. And people at my church like it. And I'm reaching a particular audience who look forward to getting it because it's interesting. And I find it interesting. And it's more of a passion project than something that makes money.
It's super niche, right? This isn't a Christian blog. It's not a Christian theology blog. It's not even really a church calendar blog. It's like a even more specific Substack than that. And I think that this is the key to success for this sort of thing is 99% of people are going to be like, what? I would never subscribe to that. But for that fraction of a percentage of people, they're like, oh, I've always wanted to know who St. Andrew is. I've always been curious about what the feast days are. Finally, somebody who will go through this and explore this with me. This is exactly what I'm looking for.
And in particular, because I'm English, I live in England, I write about England. And in the UK, there's a little bit of a tension between the English, the Scots, the Welsh, and the Northern Irish, because we are the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And Welsh writers often write about Wales and Scottish writers, but English people tend to feel bad about writing about England. But I don't care because I'm English. I'm a member of the Church of England, which is only the church in England. It's not in Wales. It's not in Scotland, but there are Anglican denominations. But I guess if you're like a member of an ACNA church in North America, you might go, hey, this is where our Christian heritage is, and this guy's got some interesting things to say on that. The specificity of it is intentional, because before I was rather unfocused, but actually this is drawing people in, and it's pushing some people away, and that's fine. I have other blogs that are not of this sheep pen, but you're about to come in there.
Yeah, so I was going to point out there's one other author who had that same English pride and didn't care if you didn't like it and wrote quite a bit on this, and his name was J.R.R. Tolkien. So the English myths were lost to history. So we don't know the stories that the Anglo-Saxons told their children around the campfire at night. All of that got lost to history, but we do have their language still. And so Tolkien, as a linguist, saw all of these words and names like Alfred, elf friend, and built his own language based off of the Anglo-Saxon, the old Anglo-Saxon languages. And he then created a literary universe around this language, trying to basically reverse engineer his way into the Anglo-Saxon myths, which is where we get the Return of the King and the Two Towers and the Fellowship of the Ring and Children of Her and the Silmarillion and all these old feeling stories. The reason they feel so old is that he's trying to reinvent or rediscover the stories that Saxon moms would have told their Saxon sons around the fire at night. So don't be ashamed to be proud of being English.
Well, exactly. Thank you. Because my whole family is English all the way back, and they're all farmers, dairy farmers and stuff. But that blog in itself, I intend to turn into a book, which I've already written because I've been around the calendar twice. And so I could easily publish a book. And actually, I talked to a publisher about it, and it hasn't worked out for this year coming. And that's fine. I may go again next time or do an indie publishing. And you know what? I've already got 1,200 people who get the weekly email. And some of those will buy the book and just go, hey, this is a really easy present for my Aunt Jean. So it's building the platform with the thing itself.
Exactly. And if you want help on this, if you want to follow James in doing this, I have a whole podcast episode called How to Turn Your Blog into a Book, because this method of blogging your book ahead of time is really effective because, James, you have a lot of content that you've written about, and it's not all going to go into the book. And part of what's going to inform what makes it into the book and what doesn't is all of the analytics that you get from Substack. It's like, oh, well, this post is the best performing post. This is going right at the beginning of the book, right? It's like, oh, this post just didn't do very well. Maybe we'll cut this from the book. And using your engagement from your readers as a filter for what is interesting to my audience and what isn't is incredibly powerful for having a book that's basically a guaranteed hit, at least with that audience.
Yeah. And so I've got another blog that's similar, which plays into my Christian faith as well, but also because I'm a BBC comedy writer, I'm basically a sitcom writer for the last 20, 25 years. And so I've got this other thing called the Wycliffe Papers, and I've even got a mug on the screen there, which is, it's kind of like the Babylon Bee, but much more English and much geekier about the Bible. And so I always say it's jokes for people who are serious about the Bible and church history. And if you don't know your Bible well, you just won't find it very funny. And again, that's completely fine because I've got a lot of comedy stuff for people who are really in that world. So
if you don't watch, if you're the kind of person who watches rap battles between ancient theologians, Which
Yeah,
is a genre of rap battle, by the way. If you want to see Luther and Calvin have a rap battle about the differences between Calvinism and Lutheranism,
yeah.
it exists. You can find it. And the overlap of the people who watch those videos and enjoy the Wycliffe papers is probably pretty high, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And that's a new thing. I started that in May, and I thought this really plays to my strengths because I'm really interested in this world. I know how to write jokes. I've always loved 20 years ago, The Onion was really funny. And then the Babylon Bees come along, which again is a bit of a turn off for the English and the British because we don't particularly want loads of jokes about Democrats and gun ownership. And so I don't
Babylon
do
Bee
those
is
jokes.
very American and
Yeah.
unapologetically so.
Yeah. And I love it for that, but I can't write that and I don't want to, and I'm not competing with that. And again, that probably will have enough jokes to turn into a whole book at some point next year when I get a bit of time to do that, which I can then sell in person after gigs. So I do a live show, and by far the easiest way to sell books is to have people look you in the eye. You've just made them laugh for an hour. Do you want to buy a book? Yeah, sure. Which one? You could buy both. Okay. So, yeah.
It's not only an easy sell, but you're getting your commission. If you're indie published, you're getting your commission as the author, you're getting the commission as the publisher, and you're getting the commission as the retailer. So you end up keeping basically all of the money, and you're selling the book at full price because people who've just heard you speak for an hour aren't looking for a discount. I have a bunch of episodes about selling direct and selling in person. And by far the best time to sell direct is right after giving a speech or a stand-up comedy routine. Stand-up comedy is not for most people. It takes a long time to get good at that. But if you're already filling rooms full of people to hear you do jokes, people absolutely buy comedy books after hearing stand-up routines.
Yeah, so the third one is one that I paused for a bit and I've come back to, called The Situation Room. And that is a blog that's a bit like a podcast I used to do called Sitcom Geeks. It's called The Situation Room. And I'm helping people write half-hour situation comedy scripts. And so that's a really specific thing. There's very little competition for that. And I've not spent as long on that as I would like because I don't have a TARDIS and can't go back in time. But I do love writing about comedy and how it works. And that's very specific half-hour script genre. And a little bit about how to get by in the industry and that kind of stuff. And I've gone back to it and been a little bit more personal as well in terms of my own experience in the industry and just thinking, I used to be more successful than I am now. What's with that? So I'm writing a little bit more about that, but I'm also planning more posts. And I've got a YouTube channel called The Situation Room, which then says, if you want more, go over to my website, go over to my blog. And so YouTube is just kind of sending people over. I've got one video that's done weirdly 18,000 views. The others are mostly some are 4, 5, 6,000, some are a few hundred. So that's just getting people as well.
There's a technique I've seen where people who cover sensitive topics, particularly war journalists, will have shorter versions of their videos on YouTube, and then they'll have longer uncensored versions on Substack. So Substack doesn't have any rules against portraying war violence, for instance. So if you're really wanting to get on the ground footage of what's going on in Ukraine, for instance, you can't really get that through the mainstream media. You're going to be getting censored, filtered, and propagandized videos in all of the American and British outlets. But you can find independent journalists who are covering cell phone footage from the front lines and telling you what's going on. And if you're curious about drone warfare and how all of warfare has changed, you can get that. And there's a lot of journalists covering that really well on Substack. And one of the things I've noticed is that Substack leans very long form, at least in the old form of Substack. So these are not the 400-word blog posts that were popular in the 2000s. These are 3, 4, 5,000 word articles. The Substack I read the most carefully is called Tree of Woe. It's by Alexander McCrease, who I've had on as a guest on several of our most controversial episodes. How to Write for Men was Alexander McCrease. And it's basically a philosophy Substack. And he covers politics, he covers AI, but he does it from a philosophy background. And it has the smartest commenters. I've written some guest articles for it, and I've never been more intimidated by the commenters, because if you get a single fact wrong, you'll be fact-checked out the wazoo. And so these are some examples that are really different from each other of who Substack works for. What are some examples of people that Substack doesn't work for?
I think if you're trying to use it essentially as a mailing list and you don't have anything to say and you just want to stay in touch with your readers, you're just putting up kind of nothing posts, and it's probably not gonna work in your best interests. I mean, in a way, no one's just going to look at it, and that's fine. And half of your audience who get your regular emails probably haven't even heard of Substack and don't know there's a whole ecosystem there. But it's a bit of a missed opportunity, and it doesn't do it as well. Kit would be much, much better, or those other ones that you recommend.
Yeah, and it also doesn't really work for promotional type emails. You're not really supposed to promote on Substack. Like, you can include a promotion in a content email, but it's actually against terms of service every time I've checked, even though it's not enforced. But if you were to do a Black Friday deals type post, that's technically in violation of the TOS. You're not supposed to do marketing emails. I've never seen that enforced against authors. In fact, I've heard people from Substack celebrating authors who've sold a lot of books on Substack, even though that's technically against the rules. To like directly, although again, you can include promotion in your normal Substack post, but there's a kind of email that a very prolific author will do. So let's say you've got 24 books that you've written, where every month you put a different book on sale. And so over the course of 2 years, every book goes on sale 1 month. That's a really popular email newsletter. It keeps you in touch with your readers. It makes you a lot of money. And it's not the kind of newsletter that would be appropriate for Substack. Substack is more of you reviewing other books, you talking about philosophy. The email itself has to be basically a blog post in email form. It can't just be a promo email. And so there's a real cultural difference there between an email newsletter and a Substack, even though the emails seem very similar.
I guess they're covering themselves against people who are setting up accounts specifically and exclusively to basically use it as junk mail. So right. They've covered themselves. Despite having 3 different Substacks, I was unaware of that stipulation that you just said, but it wouldn't occur to me I have a contract with the readers that I'm going to, so if I had a backlist of 12 books and I wrote once a month, I would write about the book and what I learned in that book. And, I wrote it in 2017 and this was going on in my life and the world was a crazy place for this reason or that reason. So it's not salesy at all in that. And you can't embed like a Shopify shop on a page or something. So I use a thing called Samcart and they have embeddable codes and that kind of stuff. Yeah, that stuff won't gel with Substack at all. And that's just the way they like it. That might change, but at the moment that isn't changing.
Yeah, currently you can link to Amazon or you can link to your store, link to your Kickstarter. But I think a good rule of thumb is if I can't write 2,000 words on this topic, it's probably not appropriate for a Substack. It just as a kind of a helping you decide, like, does the idea of writing 2,000 words, you're like, finally, I'm not restricted, then Substack's probably for you. But if you're...
then I would urge you to reduce it to 1,400 words because it will be much better. But I would say you're right that Substack is a longer read. Most articles are too long and most articles are not quite focused enough and could be shorter because there are no gatekeepers and it's kind of journalists kind of unleashing or writers or whatever. I think you're right that this has to be substantial. This has to be an idea you want to take it. But I'm the 1,200 mark on my almanac and I just think that feels about right.
And you'll find that for different audiences have a different tolerance for how long they want. So when I'm reading a philosophy Substack article, it's going to be long because just introducing the topic takes a lot of words, whereas other things can be shorter. But yeah, even 1,400 is a lot for an email in the sense of like a traditional promotional email. So hopefully have a good sense of if Substack is for you. And if Substack is for you, now we're going to kind of transition into all right, here's how to do Substack well. So we're going to move to the Substack pro tips. And I want to start with growing your Substack following. How do you get more subscribers? And so for the person who just signed up for Substack, they have 0 subscribers. What advice do you have for them on their journey to 100?
I think it's firstly just the normal thing of how you would go about getting subscribers to a mailing list or anything like that. So in that sense, it's no different from just a regular mailing list. So just send out an email to say, hey, I've started a Substack or I've started a blog and you might be interested. but also make sure that first thing you write is really interesting. Think long and hard, and maybe even plan a little series so that you don't immediately, blog fade. I mean, there's pod fading, isn't there? Where once you've done about 6 or 7 episodes, a lot of people give up. So you just want to have a clear plan for how you're going to sustain this, but also how often you're going to write. And because I think the other thing that's a really good idea is just to make sure that you don't disappoint people by not posting when you say you will. So it could be fortnightly. It could be every 2 weeks. You don't have the word fortnight, do you? It's a computer game, isn't it?
No, I am a big fan of bringing the phrase fortnightly back, because Americans will use the phrase bi-weekly, which can either mean twice a week or every 2 weeks. It's ambiguous, which makes it a useless phrase.
Yeah. But whatever you decide to do.
The number one goal of language is to communicate something clearly. And if the meanings are different and contradictory, it makes the term not work. Whereas fortnightly is unambiguous. So
it only
make
means
fortnightly great again. Bring the good old English back.
Yeah, it means every 2 weeks in England, but it doesn't apply to the rest of the world. So I think the usual rules apply, almost as if you're launching a podcast as well. Again, frequency, delivering on the promise, having a good title. I use AI to say, give me 10 titles for this 1,000-word article I've just written, and 5 of them are usually okay, 2 of them are quite good, and then 1 of them is close, and then I change it and go, oh, that kind of seems about right. And just remembering those rules of the purpose of the title is to get them to open the article, and the purpose of the article is to get them to read to the end. So just bear in mind what each is trying to do. But the other kind of superpower that Substack has is the fact that it's a platform of other blogs. And in that sense, it's like a slightly less angry version of Twitter, but with a much longer attention span. There's a thing within the app called Notes that is like a little social media for people who are on Substack, who can just put up thoughts and this, and there's no particular word limit to it. And people can engage with each other and exchange ideas. And there's now quite a lot of self-promotion and humble bragging like you get on most social media, which is kind of annoying. But if you just post on that every day, maybe something you're thinking about, it doesn't have to be promoting your article, and you just engage with other people who are writing about the kinds of things that you're writing about, then you will start to build up relationships. I don't do much of that at the moment. I've done a little bit of that with 1 or 2 of my blogs. But overall, if you're starting with nothing and you've got time, then that would be another way to do it. But now, unfortunately, because Substack has just had a bit of an injection of famous people and money, I think, and investment, people are thinking, it's not like the old days. Like 18 months ago, where it was just a lovely free platform that everyone just talked and got along. It's like what people thought Blue Sky would be like, I guess. I don't know. I've never looked at it. But there is still that engagement. And I think it's a fairly good faith, happy place. But unfortunately, the more humans that show up, the less good faith it will be, because we're the worst.
So yeah, Notes are basically a microblogging platform, to use the old social media terminology, which is what Twitter originally was, a microblogging platform. That's how it was pitched. Well, it was actually a podcasting platform, but then they changed their name to Twitter. And I remember the old days when the rings were forged. So it's microblogging. So if you don't have 1,400 words to say about something and you don't want to trigger an email, because a note doesn't trigger an email. It just posts inside of the Substack ecosystem. Although I think there's like a roundup of notes email that you can get, like a digest or something. But it's not the here's a boom, this big blog post emailed to you, like a regular post to Substack. And your microblog posts can be shown to strangers on Substack. I'm not sure how effective this is as a technique. I've heard some people who have been able to post notes and grab followings that way. But if your goal is to get to your first 100, what I would recommend is direct email recommendations, where you email a friend being like, hey, James, I wrote this specific article that I think you specifically will be interested in. And not, I'm going to email everybody the first one I wrote, but specifically, James and I have been talking about ancient Rome, and I just wrote an article about ancient Rome and the Testudo formation. And so I'm like, hey, I think you'd like this. It has applications to the shield of faith, which is in the Bible. He's like, oh, that's interesting, or he's not. But that one-on-one email, people really underestimate this. And it also forces you to have a Timothy for that post, because if you can't think of anybody to email this post to, maybe that's not a post you should write. And so your first 100, you kind of have to get one at a time. The algorithm isn't going to help you. Notes aren't going to help you. But one thing that will is the people who are reading you. So if, let's say you just have 24 readers, if you write the kind of posts that they will share, or when they share, people will check out, anybody visiting a Substack page will first get hit with a please subscribe page, and then they'll get hit with a reminder to subscribe like a dozen times while they're on Substack. And so creating something shareable has a huge impact on how your Substack grows. And I actually have a patron toolbox tool that will help with this. So the blog optimizer, I tested it today on Substack to see how well it works for Substack, and it works great. So it will give you suggested titles. So you're talking about how you get 10 title ideas. Well, if you run it through the blog optimizer, it'll give you like 30.
Oh, great.
It'll give you different kinds of titles and different kinds of categories. And some of the categories may not apply to this particular blog post, but you'll get a lot that you can work with. And it will also give you suggestions for search engine optimization, which is, I would say, a weakness of Substack in that it doesn't have a lot of SEO built into it, and it has some SEO flaws built into it. I was kind of shocked because I did a quick SEO audit of Substack. There's some really basic things it's not doing well. And so it's really not geared around ranking on Google and bringing in strangers from Google. And I've noticed that when I do Google searches, I don't find Substacks recommended that often. I don't know what your experience has been.
Yeah, it isn't optimized well, I don't think. So that's definitely a black mark against it. But you're right about the steady growth as well. My growth has been very steady, but it just keeps on going. Again, it's more akin to podcasting in terms of slow growth rather than something going viral. But occasionally somebody writes something that absolutely strikes a nerve, and it just feels like a lot of people start talking about it. And so that can suddenly blow up in internet parlance. But it's not that blow uppy as a platform, in my view.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't have viral built into it. But I will send my wife Substacks. I'll text them to her. I've like, oh my gosh, I just read this. Or a group of friends. Here's this philosophy of AI. Alexander McCreesh said another crazy thing about AI. He found out that it hates us. Here's his evidence for it. And I will send it. And I will say one tip, and this is an SEO tip, but it also helps make it more viral, is something called meta description, which you actually can control in Substack. I checked. It's buried in the advanced settings. But if you're using, I have another tool called the SEO GEO optimizer, which is similar to the blog optimizer, but it's focused more around SEO, and it will write you an SEO description that will also be the little preview paragraph that if somebody texts your article to a friend, what that person will see when iMessage or Google Messages shows them a little preview of the post. And if that is really well written and a good tight summary that inspires them to read more, it will help accelerate your growth. And so if you're a patron already and you're already on Substack, this is a really easy thing you can do right now. Is just run your posts through the SEO optimizer in the patron toolbox and just copy and paste the description. Or you can tweak it if you want, but just copying and pasting it is way better than leaving it blank, because as far as I can tell, Substack does not have a meta description generator where it'll use AI to write you one. And so if you don't do it, I think it's up to Google.
I think the preview thing, there's like a subtitle as well. So you have a title and a subtitle to every post. So I think it default uses your subtitle for the other sort of the metadata. I'm still pretty hazy on metadata, I have to say. I don't, that's not my natural thing. Like, I just turned 50, okay?
Yeah.
So,
and I will say optimizing metadata is not a Substack way of thinking of articles.
yeah.
So Substack is for people who just want to write and don't want to worry about SEO. The thing is, worrying about it a little bit will help, especially if you have tools that do almost all the work for you. But there's a lot of very successful people on Substack that are very successful because they started off with a small group of readers who then would share occasionally various articles with various friends. Then those readers would become readers, right? It's very organic, very word of mouth style growth. And then the other big way of growing is becoming friends with other Substackers where they recommend you and you mutually recommend each other. And Substack really pushes this recommendation feature.
Yeah. And also then if you do get to a significant number, you can then go have a paid membership And so that's what I've got on one of my blogs on the Wycliffe papers. You can become a loyal Lollard, because Lollards were the followers of Wycliffe. So again, even the members area is a niche joke that is not for most people. It's not for everyone. And that's also my paid area for my Stand Up Theologian podcast as well. And so that's just a little place where you can go. And I've read that the Substack in-house algorithm will be slightly pushing people towards blogs that are monetized, that have got membership, because that's how they make money. Because the other amazing thing about Substack is that you could have a blog on there that has 30,000 followers. And if you're not monetized, if you don't have a members area, that's free. I don't know what Kit's limit is, 500, 1,000. Beyond that, you're paying.
10,000. So Kit goes up to 10,000 for free.
Okay,
they used to go up to 1,000, but it's interesting. One of the things I really like about Substack is that it's changed the ecosystem. So it's forced its competitors to improve. So Patreon, you were talking about their emails aren't very good, which is true, but they're way better than they used to be because Patreon's been forced to improve the quality of their email engine to compete with Kit and Substack. And Kit has also made improvements, adding payment features and a bigger free plan also to compete with Substack. And it's been really good for the ecosystem, forcing other platforms to improve. And Kit is the one that's really trying to compete with Substack, and it's added a recommendation engine just like Substack. The reason why I recommend Kit is that it has a lot of the features of Substack, but it also has a lot of you can sell products. It's got an e-commerce store built right into it. You can do reader magnets really easily. It's more geared towards more of e-commerce, more fiction, but it doesn't really have a place for the blog post to live. So that one core feature doesn't really exist in Kit. You can set it up with something called RSS to email, where your WordPress will automatically send an email through Kit, but that requires a bit of setting up to do initially. But then it runs automatically after that. But Substack's way easier to use. We'll get more to the making money first, but I want to ask some questions about engaging your readers with your content and how best to do that. Because you have kind of a blank page problem where you sign up for Substack and you have this big blank page and you're like, what do I put here? Should I make it long? Should I make it short? Should I put a video? Should I make this a podcast? So how do you figure out what is the best kind of content to engage your particular audience on your particular topic?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you just need to take a long, hard think about what you want to do, because you're about to run a marathon. You're not about to go on a sprint. So I would just think long and hard about what is sustainable. What are you interested in? Come up with 20, 30, 40 different ideas and just say, well, where should I start? What's a good way in? And maybe think about that. You don't need to, in fact, it's better if you don't make them sequential so that you have to read the first one, this, and I've been going through a series of this and that without a lot of recapping. And that maybe can work. But overall, I would just advise coming up with a lot of ideas and then just think, where should I start? And again, just talking to people. I mean, your advice is always brilliant about just thinking about your Timothy. Who is this for? Where should they start? And for some, you want to start at a particular place. So my Wycliffe paper starts with jokes about heresies on the Trinity. And weirdly, on exactly the same day, a Babylon Bee joke came up, which somebody said, hey, they've nicked your joke. And I think I said, there's no way they could have done that, because although they arrived on the same day, they will have a system where somebody thought of this joke 6 weeks ago and it got checked and proofed and they did artwork and stuff. But there is particular jokes which put people off and draw people in. So you just want to think, who am I trying to attract and who am I actually not trying to attract, because they're just going to inflate my numbers and then wander away. So it's just thinking, it's a bit like writing a book. What's the introduction? Where am I starting? And you're asking people to go on a journey with you, or you're just sort of laying your stall out rather than just a hot topic, hot take. But again, this is part of your ecosystem world, which is probably leading towards a book. If you're listening to this show, you've got a book. So how are you going to get people from your head and your mailing list to buying that book? But also, you might be writing the book as you go, as I was just saying before, like you're writing it almost week by week. And so I think just thinking where you are in the process rather than panicking about the blank page, filling a blank page and then sending it, because, that's probably not going to do you very well.
Yeah. What about analytics? So I totally agree on the Timothy, talking to Timothy. You have to start there. So step one, real humans. But let's talk a little bit about the analytics as a way of listening to your Timothy in aggregate. What are your thoughts on the Substack analytics engine? Because we used to have in WordPress world Google Analytics, which were really good. And then they got awful. Google basically destroyed their analytics, I think, because of some European regulations. I'm not sure. Google Analytics have become just awful and really bad at answering the one question that a blogger wants the answer to, which is, which of my posts have been the most popular? So does Substack have analytics to help you answer that question?
It has some. I suspect they wouldn't satisfy you because you like analytics. They give you open rates, but obviously they're not tracking eye movements all the way down. They're not saying that. It's not like YouTube where the analytics are just unbelievable, where, yeah, on average, people bailed out at minute 1 minute 38 seconds, and so you don't get anything as granular as that, but you do get open rates, you do get likes, you can get comments, and it is often interesting to me where I just think, oh, people really liked that one, I wonder what it was they liked about that article, or ask for engagement. I'm not someone who asks for comments as much as maybe I could or should. So again, that's a way of seeing have people read all the way to the bottom. If you ask them to make a comment and they do, that does tend to show that you are getting engagement. So there are little ways in which you can lay breadcrumbs for your readers, and you realize, the breadcrumbs have gone. You start to get a sense of it. And then there are also polls as well. You can do a little bit of, I think their polling stuff is very basic, and I think that could probably be better. And actually, I've run Opinion X polls offline, as it were, just to say, could you just tell me what you think about this or that? And so there are other ways of going about it. But yeah, the analytics are okay for me because I just can't be bothered to read a lot of analytics. And in a way, I trust myself that if I find something interesting, my audience will probably find it interesting too. But then again, some people just are much more focused than that, and that's completely fine. I don't know if other systems give you better analytics than this. Maybe if you had a WordPress blog, that might give you a bit more, but I don't know. Do you have any sense of what the alternatives are?
Yeah, I'm digging around in Substack's analytics right now, and I'm actually pretty impressed. It's got here under stats audience, it will give you an audience overlap with other Substacks, where how much of your audience overlaps with these other Substacks. So it's like, these are the other Substack channels I should be reaching out with, right? Maybe having them come on as a guest, write a guest post for me, or ask if I can write a guest post for them. A lot of the old blogging techniques of guest posting and commenting work really well on Substack. And so all that old stuff, it's always worked, but it works particularly well on Substack, and the commenting particularly because it's attached to your identity in this really strong way. You leave a comment on somebody's blog, it's a really smart, in-depth comment. They can very easily click and go and read your stuff. And like, oh, we're very similar. I have 2 Substack accounts. I have one under novel marketing that I just use for commenting, and it's grown to 30 or 40 subscribers just from commenting. Like I've never posted there. It's not a real Substack. It's just like a ghost account, but it draws in just from me commenting, and I guess people finding me and knowing who I am. And it'll probably get some work because of this episode.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. He will more people to disappoint with no articles.
Yeah. I have one post being like, hey, here are my 4 blogs and where you can find them. And one of them is Christian Publishing Show, which, to be fair, is a real Substack, and it's a separate account. But yeah, you can see a chart of your total followers and what's growing. It's got a chart for retention. It will give you a sense of where people are coming from. Are your people coming from Facebook or X or from the email newsletter? You can graph that. And and
you can also integrate, so you can take an existing mailing list and upload it. I think Cary's Almanac, I had a MailChimp newsletter before, and I think I just uploaded that. So I started on 170 or something like that, and I'd been accruing that not particularly well over the previous few years. So, and therefore you can see how long people have been as well. You can look at individual people and how long, and I think individual open rates, or they rate them out of 5 stars for how many of your posts they're reading, I think.
And you can get unsubscribed feedback. So when somebody was a paid subscriber and they cancel, they have an opportunity to leave you feedback as to why they're leaving. That's really helpful as well. So we should probably talk about the money. Because this is, I think, for most people, the most appealing thing about Substack is the fact that Substack will give them money, or rather, Substack will allow them to get money directly from their readers. So how do you figure out, or how have you decided what to make free and what to make put behind the paywall, so to speak?
I think that the freemium model does tend to work. And I guess there are two ways of going about it. One is you have incredibly specialized knowledge that you could monetize and give a whole extra level. And that knowledge is extremely valuable to people. So if you know about certain financial markets, or if you know about just very niche bits of knowledge where you can then just charge for that extra knowledge or extra insight, then that's great. You could charge either. And again, downside, Patreon's better for this. You can charge monthly or annually. There isn't a lot of wiggle room. You can't have tiers of membership, which is not good for some. It suits me for the Wycliffe papers. So I have a members area where you get a free Saturday extra thing called the Wycliffe Weekender. And then we have a monthly Zoom chat. So I'll send them a link. So those, if you're a member, paid member, I can email you privately so they don't appear on the blog, and I can say, oh, here's the Zoom link and we'll have a chat. There is a way of doing that on the actual platform itself, but I'm not particularly confident that everyone's got the app, and that feels like I'm giving people who want to give me money homework that they don't particularly want. And then I also say, so the Wycliffe papers is jokes, so I say, you can see all the jokes in advance and tell me which ones you like and which ones you don't. And if some of them don't rate, then I'll know not to put them out. But you get to see all of them. And so there's extra little bits of content and extended podcast episodes as well.
Yeah, something you might consider. One of the Babylon Bee features, if you pay enough money, is that you get to submit jokes for the Babylon Bee to publish. And I have a friend who gets headlines published with the Bee all the time. And like, you have a certain number you can submit every day, and he always maxes out his numbers every day. And so what works is what tends to work well is how you can customize it to your particular audience, right? So giving everybody kind of a silly in-group name, really good strategy, because just calling them members or subscribers doesn't work very well.
Because also people don't know what is a subscriber? Am I a follower, or am I a member, or am I a subscriber? And which of those is paid? And some people don't want to click on a button because they think they're going to have to pay money to become a subscriber. No, you can be a subscriber. It's a paid member, so having a name for it, I think, is really helpful in just saying that this is the extra thing.
Yeah, I went real big on Patreon and Patron. So it's the Patron toolbox. So it's the most generic naming system in some sense, but I'm stuck with it now. One thing I am researching right now, it looks like Substack does not remit sales taxes, which is actually something that Patreon does do. So you would be responsible for remitting sales taxes if what you're giving is sales tax eligible. This is actually a real big downside of Substack in the States.
Oh, yeah, because you got state things, and whereas I guess I have to declare my income and I pay VAT on it or something like that.
Yeah, so a lot of these services will handle the VAT for you in the UK, but they won't handle sales taxes for you in the States. So that's something I would research. Spend some quality time with Grok to help create a good sales tax plan.
But as you say, recently on a podcast, you talked about how there are a few successful people who make a lot of money who give the impression that everyone's making more money than they actually are. The reality is, if you get a newsletter of 1,000 people, you might have 25 to 50 people become paid members. That's a pretty good conversion rate, actually. You may go up to 10,000 followers and that kind of stuff. And of course, all of those people with the thousands of followers who suddenly blew up on Substack give you the impression that you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of followers and that this could be your job. And it's like, it really isn't going to be your job, but it is useful to have that deeper level of connection with people who like you and who want to pay you more money because they think you're great and they don't want you to stop writing books or stop producing the podcast. And so in general, a lot of the things, I think might have been Stu McLaren, who's really good on tribes. I think he used to have a podcast called Tribe, and they basically say what sometimes people do is they then load up their members with freebies that they've paid for, to the point where people go, they can't read it all, they can't keep up with it, and then they cancel because they're not getting value out of it. But they never even join the membership area for the bonuses anyway. And so that's why I always say, if you become a loyal Lollard, you get an extra email on Saturday with everything on it. That's basically it. And a replay of the Zoom chat that's monthly. But overall, I'm not going to bombard you with free stuff because I haven't got time to write it and you haven't got time to read it. And so I think it's just bearing, and that's a downside of Substack, is that you can't have like a tip jar. That's not embedded in the thing. So it's either a monthly thing or an annual thing, or it's kind of nothing. You can set up a tip jar offline, I guess, if you want, or have a product that you sell or somehow if you've got an online shop. But overall, I think people think that having a members area is just this big thing and this big commitment, whereas actually it's just letting people in and giving people a bit more access, which is what they really want, I think.
Yeah, what Alexander McCrease does on Tree of Woe is he gives away the first, I think, 1,000 or 1,500 words of his big, long essay.
Yeah.
And then you have to pay to see all of it. And I think some of them he just gives away for free for everybody. And then occasionally he will gate them. It's interesting because when he created Cosmark, the AI, initially he gave it away to all of his Substack followers that were paying by making it a paid post. So the only way to get the link for a Cosmark AI was to being a paying patron. It's like, what a cool way of giving a gift to the patrons, because you can link to anywhere. And sure, somebody could share that link with a friend or whatever, but that's not really a concern in this context. Because who's it most valuable for? It's the people who've gone with him on his journey of researching biases in AI and who trust his tuning of a special AI model. And all of that kind of came out of his content. And then he did the special post. The other approach, though, and this is kind of like using it as tip jar, is what I do with Christian Publishing Show. So I don't give anything special to the paying folks. It's very much like the tithe plate at church, right? It's like you don't get a special sermon if you pay a bigger tithe. You get the same sermon everybody else gets. You get the same access to childcare, right? Everybody just donates however much they feel led to donate. And I haven't even done any like pledge drives or anything for the Substack. I did a big one for the Patreon to kind of fund it initially. And there's paying patrons or paying Substack members. I don't have a special name for those folks either. But if any of you are Christian Publishing Show listeners, then what do you think the supporters of Christian Publishing Show should be called?
The collective noun, isn't it? You can always have fun with
a collective noun.
Is it like a murder of crows or a murmuration of starlings?
You need a dinium or there's a word for what a collective noun is.
Oh, how great! I didn't know that. That's really cool.
It's not in common usage, but you do see it on Wikipedia. Anytime you look up a place name, it will say what the dinium. No, this is for people from that place. Right. So people from Austin are called Austinites. Right. So the word Austinite is in a category. I forget what it's called. But you can be creative within the confines of there's only one membership. And this is the big thing to get around, because you can also set the price. Right. It doesn't have to be $5. I feel like most Substacks are $5, which is the minimum Substack will let you set it. But you could make it 10 or 20 or whatever. Just realize that that's the price for everyone. I think people can give more if they want to, but it's not a big part of the
There's like a founder member thing as well, where you can just have someone give you $150 at the start or whatever. So there is a little bit of wiggle room. But again, just bear in mind, I think the thing that stops people from doing it is the fact that it feels like that they're going to have to work hard to service this in order to give value for money. And I don't think people are joining your paid area for the extras, but I think they do want a little bit. It's just whatever you promise, just make sure you deliver it. And there are people who do have paid subscriber Substacks who started it quite early and then were just like, oh yeah, sorry, life got in the way. It's like, it was kind of 3 months and you were charging people money, and suddenly, if you're going to build a tower, make sure you have everything you need to complete it, as somebody once said.
That's true. Although if something comes up and you have a good reason, like you have some medical event or something, I find that people who are supporting you through something like that tend to be pretty understanding if you have a good reason and if you don't make a regular habit of it. So don't let this create unnecessary anxiety for you. But you do need to have a plan, just like James was saying, and you do need to deliver on what you promised to deliver. And another thing that Substack lets you do, and I think this is really cool, is another way of rewarding paid subscribers, is limiting comments to only paid subscribers. So if your comment section is getting out of control, or there's more comments than you can read, one way to help fix that, while also removing the trolls, while also making money, is to say, hey, if you want to leave a comment, you've got to be a paying subscriber. Trolls will never give you money to then leave an angry comment.
Yeah, but if you've got too many people commenting, that's a really nice problem to have. You're in good shape if you're worried about that.
Yeah. Alexander has that, almost has that. It's not uncommon for him to have 50 or 100 comments, which doesn't seem like a lot, but these are like 500 word comments. It's like, the comment section is like quite a robust debate, and they're debating each other. It's, if you're into philosophy, the Tree of Woe is a great place to hang out with other people who are really smart and really into philosophy, because there's not a lot of places online to have like a good faith philosophical discussion, right? Like social media is not really good for that.
Yeah.
I was on X recently and I saw two people having a good faith theological discussion over a very controversial topic. And I was literally like showing my wife, I'm like, Margaret, look at this.
It's broken.
It was like seeing a purple cow. It was like, they're not name calling, they disagree, but they're respectful. They're both like, it's like, and it was a big long discussion and other people were chiming in. Is X becoming a wholesome place?
Maybe.
Elon Musk promised to fix the algorithm. Maybe he did. So I feel like we've hit the big points on Substack in terms of a lot of its features. There's a lot of nitty gritty features and like algorithm optimizations, and there's Substacks on how to do Substack that you can
There are a
follow
lot of those.
Yeah, if you want to get into the game of Substack and the algorithm, we haven't covered that on purpose, partly because algorithm hacks tend to change over time, and none of it will fix you thrilling your audience or not. So if you thrill your core audience, the well-tuned algorithm will reward you for that. And if you don't thrill your audience, no amount of algorithm hacking is going to fix it. And so starting with a core group of readers and giving them content that gets them excited. And that may be leaning into your nerdy side, right? So it's like, I'm really into British cathedrals and I'm going to visit a new cathedral every week and I'm going to take pictures and I'm going to talk about this cathedral for 3,000 words.
Yeah.
And there's going to be people who are into that. Yeah. Most people are not, but the people who are might be into it enough that they might be willing to throw you $5 every month as a way of saying thank you for visiting this cathedral I've always wanted to go to.
And the way to get discovered for that would be, that lends itself to YouTube. But of course, you don't own your YouTube subscribers. But if you do it and just say, if you want more, in fact, on my Substack, I've written a whole thing about Simon Sudbury, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was beheaded at the Peasants' Revolt in 1381, which I literally saw on Saturday going to Canterbury Cathedral. So it was, so you can sort of point people to there and build it and build community in a way that YouTube just isn't really going to do that. So YouTube's amazing for discoverability. But then also you could have an extra video on your Substack that is embedded only on Substack, that isn't available anywhere else. So you can upload videos directly to Substack. So a bit like you were saying earlier about journalists who have stuff that's too graphic or troubling.
But it also could be bonus, right? So I'll show you the outside of the cathedral for free, but for the inside of the cathedral tour, you can find that on my Substack. That kind of approach works really well. And I want to underline something I should have mentioned at the beginning, and this is, how cancelable are you on this platform? So on YouTube's algorithm can just flick a switch and you go dark, and everything that you work to build, you've lost, and there's nothing you can do. But on Substack, they don't have that same view. So you actually own your subscribers, or at least you own the email addresses of your subscribers. They've chosen to give you their email addresses, and so you can export your followers from Substack and then import them over to Kit or whoever else. There's thousands of email service providers. And if you are concerned about being canceled, if you're on the edge of the Overton window, a good practice is right after you send an email or right before you do a post, you just export your list of subscribers as a backup, just in case. But usually these kinds of platforms, they'll cancel you and they'll give you 30 days or whatever to download your subscribers so you can move. But because you can move, and because banning you or canceling you doesn't really have any impact on you, because of this technical reason, you don't get the kind of cancel campaigns for a Substack creator that you would get on a YouTube or on a Blue Sky, because they're like, well, they'll just move to a competitor, and nobody feels happy or cares that the technical vendor behind the scenes changed. It doesn't feel like a victory. And everyone was getting emails on week 1, and then you were canceled, and on week 2, everyone's still getting emails. They're just getting them from a different place. So it doesn't feel like a win. And because of that, you're much safer from the mobs on a Substack platform than you would be on any of the other social networks.
Yeah, I think the Overton window seems pretty wide on Substack, and you don't have people at the moment. It may become more popular. This may become more of an issue, but you don't have people say, well, I'm taking my Substack elsewhere if they continue to allow this person to post. That's slightly not cool at the moment, but as more famous people turn up, they may start to throw their weight around. But I guess we'll have to watch this space.
Yeah, I also feel like cancel culture has gone away now that the federal government isn't pressuring behind it. So there's been some big revelations that a lot of the Meta canceling and the YouTube canceling and the Twitter canceling was actually at the behest of the Biden administration. So there have been some real famous letters given to the Justice Department where the Biden administration was asking / pressuring social networks to ban specific conservative commentators. Totally in violation of the First Amendment. The government in the United States is not allowed to tell people what kind of political speech they can do. That's like a big time no-no, and there will be more hearings on this in the future. But the thing is, all of the people who are doing that are no longer in government. And the people who are in government now aren't doing that sort of thing. Now, it could change, but my hope is that we'll have kind of bigger supports to keep the government from silencing people, both legal and technological, kind of moving into the future. And Elon Musk owning X and having a very different political philosophy has allowed a level of fact checking where now that, anyway, it's very complicated. And just realize that Substack is in this conversation, but it has not issued a letter to the Justice Department talking about all the people it canceled on behalf of the Biden administration. Maybe they will, but I don't think they could, because I don't think they canceled anybody. So they have a good reputation as far as Thomas Umstattd is concerned, where I have not heard anybody complaining about Substack censoring folks because of what they posted on Substack, other than spam and adult content, which I think is a good place to draw the line.
Yeah, that's not an extreme point of view.
Yeah, nobody's going to get angry at you for getting rid of the spammer. So, James, where can we'll have links to all 3 of your Substacks that we mentioned at the beginning in the show notes. Yeah. But you mentioned your home website. Where can people find out more about you?
So that's jamescary.co.uk. Cary is spelt like Cary Grant, who is also from England. So people can go and look there. But those Substack, Cary's Almanac, and the funny one's called the Wycliffe Papers. So if you like jokes and you are serious about the Bible, then that might be for you.
And before we go, do you have any final tips or encouragement for somebody who's thinking about giving Substack a go?
I think the one other thing is that no platform is perfect for anyone, really. So don't be annoyed that you can't do lead magnets. Okay, don't be annoyed that it's this or it's that. It's a pretty good platform, so make the most of it. But I think any platform is always going to be not a perfect fit. But just give it a go. But if you do give it a go, I think you have to give it a year. I would really try to have a plan to succeed for a year rather than fade away. But I know life happens and things, but I think plan to make it a success, but it isn't going to come very quickly.
I think that's a really good point to end on. This is not really, no social network really makes you famous all at once anymore. But even if it does, you don't actually want that, because that can be very psychologically harmful to go from totally obscure to totally famous overnight. Like the people who that happens to, it tends to ruin their lives. So it's okay that it takes a long time, and just give yourself runway and give yourself permission to experiment a little bit at the beginning, because you may not know exactly what will resonate with your audience, right? There's a bit of a back and forth as you're getting feedback from your readers, as you're looking at your analytics. You may find, oh, this particular kind of post is doing better than this other kind of post, and it will evolve over time. And I'll say that's what's happened with this podcast, right? So novel marketing, before I was doing the podcast, I was doing a website called Author Tech Tips, which was all social media advice. How to get signed up on social media, how to get signed up on Facebook. This is 2008, 2009, when those actually helped you sell books. And it's interesting because this episode is going all the way back to my roots of what I was doing almost 20 years ago, helping authors with a new social network and figuring out if it's a good fit for them and the pros and the cons and how to do it. But we went through quite an evolution. This is not normal content now for novel marketing. An episode focused on nonfiction is not normal. And so it's okay to iterate, but it's also okay to go back to the basics, so to speak.
You could have if you're a fiction writer and you, for example, write historical fiction, you could easily have a Substack set in the Georgian period where you just talk about the period that you write about. I think that would be an interesting thing to do, or I'm really interested in the English Civil War, those sorts of things. So if you're writing a particular genre or you're interested in your genre, it's a great platform to write about other books in your genre, because I think there are lots of writers who write about writing on Substack. So it can work for some fiction writers. It's just it won't work if you're going to publish your fiction there. It's just not designed for that. Don't
do it. Don't write about writing, because even if you do get sales from those people, it will poison your also bots on Amazon. It's like people who bought this medical thriller also bought Skunk and White's Elements of Style. That does not make somebody likely to buy your book, and it doesn't help Amazon know who to recommend your book to. So unless you're writing books on writing, don't write about writing. I know you want to, and I know you think your readers care, but they really, really don't.
Yeah. So talk about the stuff your book is about. So talk about the world that you're writing about rather than craft, unless you're writing craft books. And I've done a bit of that too.
So James Cary, thank you so much for joining us today on the Novel Marketing Podcast.
It's been a great honor. I love the show. Thanks for having me.
Our featured patron is Joe Visiek, author of Scam Poetry. What happens when you reply to a scam email and ask the AI bot to write you a Shakespearean sonnet instead? The result is pure comedy gold. Author Joe Visiek discovered that a new generation of AI-powered email scammers are so automated they'll do whatever you ask, including composing a 14-line poem praising your writing while trying to scam you out of hundreds of dollars. This collection features genuine sonnets and one hilarious limerick written by scam bots, proving that artificial intelligence can master iambic pentameter but still can't tell when it's being trolled. Joel, thank you so much for being a patron of this podcast. Thank you for your support that helps keep this show on the air. I really appreciate your support and all of the other patrons that support the Novel Marketing Podcast. This episode of the Novel Marketing Podcast is a production of authormedia.com. You can find the blog version at authormedia.com/485. And I am Thomas Umstattd Jr. saying thank you for listening and live long and prosper.